Happy to welcome back into the studio a good friend from California, doing a great job representing the people of the Oakland area in the United States Congress, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Hey, Congresswoman, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. But California's booming, huh? Yeah. Jerry Brown's brought it back.
Well, some.
For some, that's true.
For some. My district still has high rates of unemployment, high rates of poverty. A lot of people who have been hit by the foreclosure crisis are still, recovering from that. So we have many, many challenges.
Do you see impacts of the sequester, too, in your...
Absolutely. When you look at our county services, when you look at furloughs, when you look at what's taking place with regard to public services, people are having a hard time. We're doing fairly well in beginning to roll out the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. But, cuts to HIV and AIDS programs, and my district, of course, has one of the highest rates in the country. Yeah. All of that is a result of sequester, the loss of jobs.
Yeah, and you know what? Nobody's talking about it anymore, and we should be. We should be. So the Congresswoman's here for this first half hour with our team, Peter Ogburn and Dan Henning. Hello, guys.
Hey, hey, hey. Good morning.
Alicia Cruz has the phones covered, and Cyprian Bolding is off this week. Monty Kanzler here, keeping us looking good on Current TV. Congresswoman, before we get to the issues of the day, you just wonder if there's any... if there's any limit to how low sometimes these conservatives will go in their attacks on this president and his administration. And then every time you think they're going about as low as they can go, they surprise you, right? So here yesterday on his syndicated show, Glenn Beck, used to be on Fox. Now he's got his, nationally. That's a pay for.
He's on radio.
Pay for view. No,
this is from his radio broadcast. He's on radio. The Blaze is a TV network.
Who's raising questions about Secretary of State John Kerry and his wife, who was taken seriously ill this week and flown to a hospital in Boston. And Glenn Beck wonders whether she might have been faking it.
Our Secretary of State, is he on his boat while the Egyptian uprising is going on? Instead of telling you the truth, they say, no, he's definitely not on his boat. That's an outrage to even ask that. Okay? And you expect me to believe that Mrs. Ketchup is in critical condition? I mean, no offense. Maybe she is.
What do you got to do with these people? Remember, they thought that Hillary Clinton faked her brain tumor.
Yeah, it's a level of cynicism and meanness that, we've never seen before. And I hope the public really gets it and understands that this is probably, and I always say it reminds folks of what Senator Mitch McConnell said in terms of their first priority was to make sure that President Obama was a one-term president. Well, he won again, big. So now their priority, of course, is to make sure that he fails in everything he does. And if they have to go after whomever on a personal basis during such a very sad period, they'll do it. They'll do anything in the world.
I mean, there's a reason why Senator John Kerry was, Secretary of State now, right, was not at the State Department the last couple of days. His wife had a very serious illness on Nantucket or the Vineyard, whichever.
I think it was Nantucket.
Nantucket, and they got her stabilized there in the small health center, more serious than they could handle. She was medevaced to Boston. He's at her side. I mean, Jesus.
If the right wing really believes in family values, then this is really a terrible example of their values.
Unbelievable. Now, on the issues of the day, I thought of you yesterday when I read that President Obama is now saying, when we look at Afghanistan, the original plan was we're going to be out of there next year, except we were going to leave a residual group of forces in Afghanistan to help the government of Hamid Karzai. Reportedly now, Congresswoman, the administration is considering something that you've been asking for a long time, is just get everybody, all of our troops, the hell out of Afghanistan. Not leaving anybody there.
We shouldn't. That's what he should do. I mean, we need to, of course, look at how we engaged in a diplomatic initiative in the region and what we need to do to, I believe, help, in terms of making sure that women's rights are protected. So there's, I think, a non-military role as we have in other parts of the world. But for years now, of course, I couldn't vote for it initially in 2001 because I knew then that this was that resolution that allowed for the military operation in not only Afghanistan, but it 30-some other places in the world in terms of it's been used 30-some times, that this could be a resolution that would go, which would allow a war without end everywhere. So I'm glad to hear the administration is moving in this direction, because there is no military solution. We don't need to leave a residual force. That's going to cost millions, probably billions of dollars. We need to begin to nation build here at home. And I'm glad to hear that the president is beginning to consider that.
Was it 2001, that vote?
It was 2001. It was after the horrific events.
You were the only vote, weren't you, against the war in Afghanistan?
September 14th, and it was a terrible time for the country, of course.
You took a lot of flack for that. Do you any regrets?
That was the right vote. Well, it was a tough vote, but when you read that resolution, it said the president's authorized to use force against any nation, organization, individual connected to 9/11. It was a total blank check, and it's been used everywhere around the world, including as legal justification for the use of drones. We need to repeal it. I have legislation to repeal it, and hopefully now the Congress will figure out there was never really a debate on it. It took the Congress out of its role in terms of our decision-making power to declare war or not, and so we need to go back and fix this.
And everybody now points to that use of for the use of force. Congress approved it. Congress approves it. And we're just operating according to what Congress has done, right?
Yeah, and that doesn't make any sense. That's in perpetuity. That's forever.
Yeah. It's you and Russ Feingold. Russ Feingold, the only one to vote against the Patriot Act.
In the Senate. I think first time in the House, from what I remember, we had 66 no votes.
Did you really?
In the House against the Patriot Act.
He was the first one. And you were the only one in the Senate, and you were the only one in the House on this resolution. So look at Afghanistan, and now I think the president's coming to this point because he's just frustrated with the Hamid Karzai. And so what have we gained in Afghanistan after all these years, all this money, and all this loss of life?
Well, first, we have to remember that we have lost many of our young men and women. Many are injured and have disabilities for life. And so part of what we have to do now is make sure that their disability claims, which is something we're working on, are expedited, and that they receive the type of benefits that they deserve and their economic security. I mean, that's the first priority. But when you look at what has taken place now in Afghanistan, and with Karzai, when you look at the type of the billions of dollars that have been ripped off, in suitcases, cash money, that's been lost. I mean, come on, what have we gained?
A lot of
the region is not
stable.
The corruption is rampant. The Taliban is there. When you look at it, we unfortunately need to figure out a way to engage more in a diplomatic initiative, recognizing that in terms of inserting American troops in Afghanistan just won't work. It has not worked, and it won't work in the future. And we have the history of of the Soviet involvement and other involvement in Afghanistan to prove that.
Right. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, our guest here in studio on the Full Court Press. Congresswoman, you were there yesterday at the White House for the meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus and President Obama. Tell us about the meeting. Good terms. What did you talk about?
Sure. It was a very good meeting. Of course, our chair, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge from Ohio, is a wonderful, great leader. And she, of course, along with President Obama, co-chaired the meeting. We talked about many issues that are of extreme importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, the African American community, communities of color, but also to our entire country. We talked about immigration reform and why it's so important to have comprehensive immigration reform, and that we cannot leave any immigrant group out, including those from the Caribbean and from Africa. Extremely important. We also talked about poverty. That's a priority of the Congressional Black Caucus in terms of the elimination of poverty. When you look at what has taken place beginning under the Bush administration, you have poverty rates now that are soaring. 16, 17 million children living in poverty in the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. So as a priority of the Congressional Black Caucus, again, as I co-chair the task force on poverty and economic opportunity, we talked about pathways out of poverty and what we're going to do legislatively. We also talked about the Voting Rights Act and how we have to make sure that everyone has the right to vote. That's our that's the essence of democracy. And of course, with the Supreme Court decision, we've got to figure out a strategy, legislative strategy, to make sure we, in essence, reverse that. We talked about that, and it was a very good, substantive meeting.
Reportedly, you also talked about gun safety.
Yes, we talked about gun
certainly
safety.
In Oakland. Did you get the sense the president is frustrated that everything seems so stalled on gun safety, and is he determined to keep going?
He's determined to keep going. The Congressional Black Caucus is determined to keep going. When you look at what has happened, say, for instance, last week in Chicago, 60-some deaths? When you look at my own district in Oakland, every day, young people getting killed. When you look at areas around the country, each and every day we're losing young men and women, young kids. And it's a shame and disgrace that we cannot get members of Congress to understand that minimally we should have background checks. We should have restriction on the number of magazine, the magazine count restriction. We should have just basic gun safety measures. And the president's fully supportive. He has not given up. The Congressional Black Caucus is going to continue to fight until we get these weapons off the streets.
California's got some of the toughest laws in the nation, an assault weapons ban in California. Has it made a difference in California?
It's made some difference, but when you don't have national standards and when you have the ability to transport weapons and
from one state
to the other, your state laws are going to be minimal at best. Again, look at my district in Oakland. Let's look at what's taking place there. And we have assault weapons everywhere, and young people are dying each and every day.
You mentioned immigration reform. The Senate passed its bill for what it's worth. I think the provisions of it I don't like, but at any rate, they've moved on that legislation. Now it's in the House. The House Republicans can't seem to make up their mind what they're going to do, so they're caucusing today to discuss what their approach is going to be, the immigration approach. Do you have any hope that a bill is going to get out to the president's desk?
Bill, as a public official, I have to have hope. Keep hope alive.
I know. You've been at it a long time.
A long time. I've been here 15 years now, and let me tell you, you can't give up. You have to keep fighting. And so, hopefully, the Republicans, at least enough Republicans, will begin to see why this is, first of all, the right thing to do. Secondly, is beneficial to our economy. We've seen the reports with regard to what the economic benefits are of comprehensive immigration reform. We're a country of immigrants. This is something we should not even have to struggle through. And, the Senate, to their credit, passed a bill. There are provisions that I do not like. Hopefully we can get a decent House bill passed and go to conference, because too many people have waited too long for this.
Yeah, indeed. And then there's the stall on the farm bill as well. So now they're thinking about, well, maybe we can get a farm bill passed if we just take food stamps out of it at all. What you said about poverty, this relates to that. We'll get into that when we come back and take a quick break. The Congresswoman is here. Glad to take your calls at 866-55-PRESS as we talk about some of the challenges facing this Congress. The biggest challenge is getting anything done with this gang of Republicans. But your call's welcome. 866-55-PRESS. We'll be right back.
Connect.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about this, the farm bill. Now, I remember that old ad, that radio commercial in the San Francisco Bay, cows in Berkeley, right? Remember that?
Berkeley Farms.
Berkeley Farms. It is in your district.
That's right.
But there's not many farms in Oakland, but still, this farm bill's important, isn't it?
It's very important. And interestingly, I was on the Ag Committee when I was in the California legislature.
Oh.
And part of my work was bringing more rural issues into urban areas, so young people especially could understand where milk came from cows. And so we brought cows to the schools in Berkeley.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
But I think this ag bill that we defeated, rightfully so, was a terrible bill. And now it's my understanding the Republican leadership are going to bifurcate. They're going to separate out the nutrition section from the farm subsidy. It's just totally outrageous, Bill.
Which is one of the most important parts of it, right? So the whole food stamp program, they just want to get rid of.
They want to get rid of it. And, you know, I was very proud of the 29 members of Congress that took the food stamp challenge. We lived off of food stamp allocation of about $4.50 a day for some of us 7 days. And it was just really quite amazing how we were able to let the public know what exactly was at stake. And it took a lot. But members of Congress came forward, talked about the unhealthy diet that people who are on food stamps and SNAP, you know, have, and why we don't need to cut that, but why we need to actually increase the allocation. And, you know, so many people are eligible, aren't even on it. People deserve this bridge over troubled waters. No one wants to be on SNAP or food stamps. I mean, I'm a former public assistance recipient, and I was on food stamps way back in the day, in the 70s. I never could have raised my children as a single mom and gotten out of school had it not been for that helping hand that I needed at that very difficult period of time. That's the way most people are who are on SNAP benefits.
You know, something that you and I have struggled with, and I guess we'll never figure out, is why of all the targets, you know, that Republicans could choose to pick on, right? They always choose the poorest of the poor, right? And the
poor,
people who need
our
help
seniors, the most vulnerable. This is a terrible moment, I think, in our country's history where it's survival of the fittest. Go for what you know, only the strong survive.
But you're fighting a good fight, Congresswoman. We're proud of you, and thank you for being here this morning.
This is the Bill Press Show.